10 years ago I survived an airplane crash. What I saw there scarred me for the rest of my life. Day 2. I knew what I saw the first night outside the plane wreck made no logical sense, so I went along with Will's and Norton's theory that it was a bear that dragged the body away, opting not to tell them that I saw anything suspicious. I assumed that I was in shock from the plane crash and saw something that shouldn't have been there. On day 2, when everyone woke up, we gathered up in front of the plane and started making plans. We had enough food to last us for 3 days at most if we rationed it, but we assumed we might be stuck longer than that. It was a long flight and the area we were stuck in was huge, so rescue was expected to be slow. Amber tried getting a signal on her phone again before her battery died, but no dice. I told her to keep her phone off until we find a more elevated area. On that note, Mitch decided to gather wood, while Norton prepared traps for rabbits or any other animals we could find. Will's job was to move the bodies further away from the plane, in order to prevent the bear from coming near us again. My job was to try to find a hill to climb or anything that could potentially lead us to our freedom. Mitch told me not to go too far away under any circumstances, and he gave me a lipstick to mark the trees, not to get lost. I put on a backpack and took a power bar and bottled water with me and started heading in one direction. I wanted to bring a knife, but the only thing we had was the hatchet, which we assumed came with the plane for breaking down doors in emergencies, and the others needed it for chopping wood. Besides, if a bear attacks you, we'll lose you and we'll lose the hatchet. Mitch said. Now remember, Norton said as he escorted me out of our shelter, if you run into a bear, just play dead. He may toss you around, but as long as you don't move, you should be fine. Now if it's a grizzly, I know. Shout at him until he gets offended and runs away, I said, and assume a high power posture. You want him to feel threatened. How do I know if it's a bear or a grizzly? I asked. Grizzlies have a hump on their shoulder. I think. You think? I raised my eyebrows. Look, as long as you go on shouting, the bear will know to avoid you. How do you know that? I watched it on that survival show with Bear Grylls. Oh, and don't run. Bears will see you as prey if you run, and then you're screwed. I went my own way while the others attended to their business. As I went on, I'd occasionally shout phrases like hey or hello to scare off any potential bears. I used lipstick to mark the trees I passed by with an X, every 10, 20 steps or so. The terrain was uneven and I almost twisted my ankle a few times, so by the time 1 hour had passed, I realized I probably hadn't gotten too far from the camp. All the while, I ran into slopes here and there, but no major hills or anything, so I reckoned we'd have to climb one of the trees to get a good view of the area. I turned back and started to retrace my steps, since I figured I'd need some time to get back. I followed the trees which I marked for about half an hour until I reached a tree which made me stop dead in my tracks. The X which I had marked on the tree was visibly smudged. Now it could have been a squirrel or something, I know, but this was different. The smudge went down from the X in 3 even lines, as if someone had drawn their fingers across the tree bark. I held my breath as I checked out my surroundings, and I suddenly became aware of the stupid mistake I made once more. I didn't pay attention to the sounds, and the forest had gone silent during my walk when I wasn't listening. I suddenly felt like I was being watched. I didn't know if I should shout to chase the potential bear away, or be quiet to avoid drawing attention, because something told me what I was dealing with here was not a regular forest predator. I opted for the second option and silently proceeded back towards the camp, painfully aware of every leaf crunching under my feet. I kept looking over my shoulder every now and again, always afraid that I'd be met face to face with something incomprehensible. The further I went though, the quieter it got around me. I felt like I was walking straight into the predator's arms. And then I heard something which made me stop. As I stepped on a crunching leaf, I heard a crunch 100 feet behind me. I wasn't sure if it was an echo or my imagination, but I shot around nonetheless and quickly scanned the area. Nothing was there. So then why did the hair on the back of my neck stand straight and I felt such primordial fear? I slowly scanned the trees again and stopped on one of them. Something was off about this one tree. And then my scream caught in my throat when I realized what I was staring at was a black figure, peeking from behind the tree. It wasn't moving and it was staring directly at me, with one hand held around the side of the tree. It stared at me as if I wasn't aware of it, and it was stalking me. I stared at it in silence for a while and it stared back, neither of us moving. I almost convinced myself that it was my imagination, like the way you see your pile of clothes on your chair in the middle of the night. But then its hand moved slightly down across the tree. I couldn't tell due to the distance, but one thing was for sure, that was no fucking bear. I turned around and started running, not caring about the rules Norton told me. Fuck the rules, fuck finding an elevation. I just ran as fast as I could to find safety. After what felt like ages, I started hearing the voices of my fellow survivors in the distance, and the sounds of the forest came back to life. I soon saw the plane group gathered around a campfire. I ran to them and turned around to see if I was being followed, but nothing was there. You okay, Sam? Amber asked. There's something out there, I said, panting, not taking my eyes off the direction I just came from. Everyone was confused, and when I explained to them what I saw just now and the night before, some of them became visibly worried. We agreed not to leave camp, and Mitch suggested to make a barricade around, in order to prevent dangerous animals from wandering in. Each survivor was to carry something for defense. However, since everyone was short of weapons save for Mitch, who claimed the hatchet for himself, the others got makeshift spears from wood. No one believed my description of the creature I saw. Hell, even I wasn't sure what I saw, but they all agreed that it wasn't safe to go alone. After lunch, we gathered up some more wood for the fire and tried to pass the time by talking to each other. Amber was a businesswoman who was on a trip like me. She used to be married, but work came first for her. Linda was having the hardest time of us all, having witnessed her sister's death in the crash. The two of them were on a vacation when it all happened. She racked her mind about how her parents would react, but Amber comforted her most of the time. Mitch was an athlete who had a knee injury, so he was visiting his physiotherapist in the country. He considered himself lucky to even come out alive, let alone avoid more severe injuries in the crash. Will was a programmer and that's all we managed to get out of him, while Norton was an assistant professor. Like Linda, he was on vacation. It got dark and cold pretty soon despite only being around 5 p.m., so we decided it was time to get back inside the airplane. Will insisted on staying outside and keeping the fire going, since it greatly improved our odds of being found. Although I didn't feel happy about him staying out there alone, I knew he was right and I sure as hell didn't want to stay out there. At around 8 p.m., Mitch, Norton and I joined him outside to keep him company. He had started building a makeshift fence by then and big, sturdy branches were already sticking out of the ground in various places around the camp. When I'm done here, this camp will be enough to last us through the entire winter, Will proudly said. Well, let's hope we don't have to stay here for so long, I replied. Norton went to take a leak. Think they'll find us soon? Will asked. Shouldn't be more than 10 days, Mitch replied. This didn't seem to lift Will's spirits. Norton was done taking a leak, so he zipped up his pants. Well, one thing's for sure, he said as he turned around towards us. At least we're spending some time away from technology. Will poked the burning wood, while Mitch stared at the fire. The fire crackled violently for a moment, illuminating Norton's face and the area around him. In that split second, I saw something black and hairy behind him, slowly creeping up on all fours, before it merged with the darkness again. It was the same creature from before. It was on all fours, right behind Norton. I opened my mouth and tried to scream, but no sound came out. It all happened so fast. Norton's jovial expression turned into one of surprise as he got yanked backwards and his sudden screaming mixed with the sound of dragging faded only moments later, as if he somehow managed to run 100 yards in mere seconds. Everybody else instantly became alert. Norton? Mitch stood up. Norton? Norton's now barely audible screams faded completely and the only sound remaining was the crackling of fire. Norton? Mitch shouted again, only getting his echo as a response. Sam, what happened? It just took him, I barely uttered. What took him? Mitch asked, and then a scream came through, which froze my bone to the marrow. It sounded like screeching tires which echoed throughout the woods and all the way to our camp. Shit, we gotta go back inside. Now, I shouted. Wait, we gotta help Norton, Mitch said. Mitch, think. If we go out there now, we're as good as dead. We gotta get back to the plane right now. All three of us ran back to the plane and barricaded it back with the luggage. The two girls were confused and distressed, asking where Norton was and what that inhuman scream was, but we had no time to explain. Listen, we need to be as quiet as possible, Mitch said. We don't know what's going on, but some fucking dangerous animal is out there. We sat for what felt like hours, long after the flame had died down. Everyone was slumped down in the plane seats, clutching their spears. I started to get sleepy, when a noise came from outside the plane. The snap of a twig. Shh, Mitch said, lying across the seats with the hatchet held tightly to his chest. A sound of scratching came from my side of the plane and I froze in place. A moment later, it stopped. I heard something that sounded like sniffing, followed by the sound of footsteps upon leaves, which faded away. I gathered the courage to lift my head just enough to peek trough the window. At first I saw nothing. And then through the darkness, I saw movement. A tall, hunched-over figure was standing where the bodies had been moved. It bent down to inspect them before grabbing one with its abnormally long arm and dragging it away into darkness, just like it did the woman the night before. We got no sleep until sunrise.